All right, second grade. So we are going to read Thank You, Mr. Falker. This is the part 4. So this is the last couple pages of Thank You, Mr. Falker. It's been such an awesome book. So remember where we were? We were on this page, we were talking about Trisha, the main character, was in the classroom with, what's his name? You got it. And they were working on the whiteboard. What were they making on the whiteboard again? That's right. And then let's read this last part right here. Then he stood up and finished washing the board. We're going to change all that, girl. You're going to read, I promise you that. Right? So we now know the main character. We know the setting. We know the problem. And some of you might have already thought about the solution, right? And you might be already making some predictions. So let's see. Now, almost every day after school, she met with Mr. Falker and Miss Plessy, a reading teacher. They did a lot of things she didn't even understand. At first, she made circles in the sand and then big sponge circles on the blackboard, going from left to right, left to right. Another day, they flicked letters on a screen and Trisha shouted them out loud. Still other days, she worked with wooden blocks and built words. Letters, letters, letters. Words, words, words. Always sounding them out. And that felt good. But though she'd read words, she hadn't read a whole sentence. And deep down, she still felt dumb. And then, one spring day, had it been 3 months or 4 months since they had started, Mr. Falker put a book in front of her. She'd never seen it before. He picked a paragraph in the middle of the page and pointed at it. Almost as if it were magic, or as light poured into her brain, the words and sentences started to take shape on the page as they had never before. She marched them off to... Slowly she read a sentence, then another, and another. And finally she'd read a paragraph, and she understood the whole thing. She didn't notice that Mr. Falker and Mrs. Plessy had tears in their eyes. How do you think she's feeling right now? Yeah, it's pretty amazing. That night, Trisha ran home without stopping to catch her breath. She bounced up the front steps, threw open the front door, and ran through the dining room to the kitchen. She climbed up on the cupboard and grabbed a jar of honey. Then she went into the living room and found the book on the shelf. The very book that her grandpa had shown her so many years ago. She spooned honey on the cover and tasted the sweetness and said to herself, "The honey is sweet, and so is knowledge. But knowledge is like the bee who made the honey. It has to be chased through the pages of a book." Do you guys remember who said that at the very beginning? Let's look and see. On the very first page, then all the family said in a single voice, "Yes, and so is knowledge, but knowledge is like the bee that made that honey sweet. You have to chase it through the pages of a book." What does that mean? You have to chase it through the pages of a book. Maybe it's like you have to look for it, you have to work hard. Then she held the book, honey and all, close to her chest. She could feel tears rolling down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. She was happy, so very happy. The rest of the year became an odyssey of discovery and adventure for the little girl. She learned to love school. I know because that little girl was me, Patricia Polacco. I saw Mr. Falker again some 30 years later at a wedding. I walked up to him and introduced myself, and at first he had difficulty placing me. Then I told him who I was and how he had changed my life so many years ago. He hugged me and asked me what I did for a living. "Why, Mr. Falker," I answered, "I make books for children." "Thank you, Mr. Falker. Thank you." Aw, I love this book so much. I'm tearing up a little bit. Why do you think Mrs. Daniel's tearing up at this end of the story? What makes this story so special? Ooh, I even have goosebumps. Yeah. So remember, whenever you're doing your reading at home, I want you to think about who the main character is, what's the setting. Think about the problem, think about the solution. And then maybe you can do something similar. You can read a story to your stuffed animal, to somebody you know, and just practice talking about the book. I hope you enjoyed it.